haere mai, and welcome to Cult Chat, the podcast where we talk about coercion, control, and all things cultish. I'm Dr. Caroline Ansley. I'm a medical doctor. As a child, I lived at the Centrepoint community, a notorious cult in New Zealand, and now I run a website that advocates for the former children of the community.
I'm Liz Gregory, and I run the Glory of Our Leavers Support Trust, and I'm privileged to walk alongside people after leaving this group as they embark on their new lives.
And I'm Lindy Jacob. I'm a former member of the Exclusive Brethren, and I'm part of the Olive Leaf Network, a new initiative in Aotearoa to support leavers of high-demand religious groups.
Come with us as we unpack the cult playbook. We'll be talking to experts and leavers of coercively controlling groups, and we will call for Kiwis to cult-proof their lives.
Come with us as we traverse the cultiverse.
A warning, this podcast contains references to subjects and discussions which may be difficult for some people to hear. Please take care of yourselves and your whānau when listening.
Hi, Caz here with my friend Anka Richter, who's the author of the fantastic book, Cult Trip. She's bringing us an exciting event this year.
Thanks, Caz. Australasia, get ready for Decult 2024, the first cult awareness conference in New Zealand, happening in Christchurch this October. Are you worried about a friend or family member who's in a group that may be causing them harm, or do you have your own story? Then join us for a weekend with experts from around the world, where those who've left cultic groups can share their experiences and meet professionals who can help them. Head to our website, decult.net, for all the info.
Come cult-proof your life at Decult 2024. I'll be there.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Cult Chat. Today, we are listening to the final instalment of a conversation I had with Sam Jahara. If you've not listened to the previous two episodes, part 1 and 2, please stop now, go back and listen to these first. We join our conversation here today where we left off in the second part of the interview. In the previous episode, Sam and I discussed our shared commonalities. Sam grew up in the Rajneesh communes as a child of sannyasins, travelling the world following their guru Bhagwan Sri Rajneesh. In the year that I was 7, I lived at Centrepoint community in Auckland with foster parents who are devotees of Bert Potter, the guru of that community. Through our conversations, we've discovered that though we're worlds apart geographically, many of our childhood experiences in these communes were frighteningly similar. In both communes, children were neglected, unprotected, sexualised from an early age, and many were sexually abused. In this final episode, we'll talk about repair work after childhood trauma, the search for acknowledgement and apology, and what we can do if it never comes. Now, I just need to note that we talk in this episode about child neglect, sexual abuse, topics which may be upsetting for some listeners. Please take care of yourself or anyone else who might overhear and think about whether this is the right thing for you to hear or view right now. Okay, let's listen to the episode.
Despite trying very hard, I've struggled to understand the widespread acceptance at Centrepoint of sexual liberation of their children, in the name of a man who simply told them he was enlightened in much the same way that the Bhagwan said the same thing. I continue to struggle to understand or feel compassion for the adults I once knew who failed me when I was a child. I spent years trying to understand what motivates an adult to join and stay in a culty group and to delay leaving. I think I've developed some compassion for most such people, but for my own situation, for the individuals who personally failed me as a child, who let their own healing, their own situation keep them from protecting me. And then in the decades since, they've allowed their excuses and cowardice to stop them from making it right. I struggle to feel compassion for them. Now, we mentioned that earlier in the episode before this. It's one thing to look objectively from the outside at a group and to weigh up the issues and to feel compassionate. But when you are an innocent victim in a system, objectivity is really elusive. So I find that objectivity with Centrepoint really elusive. When it comes to harm caused to the children I grew up with, I simply can't feel anything but anger. How do you reconcile the anger that I know you've already expressed, that you have felt for the adults that surrounded you with the compassion that I know you also feel for people like them now, caught up in this group, in groups like the Rajneesh movement?
I don't think recovery is possible without acknowledgement and genuine attempt to repair. As I said before, I also don't think anyone can recover until they have fully left emotionally, physically, and psychologically. And so compassion for people is, from my point of view, it's limited if there's no attempt to repair.
Yeah.
If I continue to hear this half apologies and excuses for their behavior, I'm not going to feel any compassion, and nor I think I should.
Yeah.
Quite frankly. And I have contact with very few people who are, genuinely apologetic and have attempted to repair and recognize how horrific everything was. And people have woken up, but it's too painful for me to be in contact with people who are still trying to come up with excuses. And I think it's too painful for me to hear family members make excuses or deny my experience altogether. I don't think I should put myself through that. I don't think anyone should really keep confronting the denial of their experience time and time again. I mean, how long do you want to keep doing that for? It's a form of self-harm, right?
Yeah. And that's the problem.
I also don't want to have contact with former children who deny my experience. I just don't. Yeah, not really interested in that. I don't know how it is for you.
I think what I have seen through my encounter over these years with people from Centrepoint and even within my own family is this idea of different narratives, and there is still, and I think it's interesting to talk here because there is still, if people are clinging to their idea of the nirvana, of the enlightenment, of the good experience, in the face of a grossly damaging experience of someone else, but it's different when it's your child. Actually, if it's someone else's experience you're not related to or not connected to, well, that's one thing. But if it's your child, your sibling, and in order to hold the family together, it has to be held around one person's story, which squashes and destroys another member. It reminds me of incest. The story around a family when incest has happened, when one part of the family or individuals in the family have to keep the truth from being told. I've just seen this over and over again, these competing narratives with people from Centrepoint, and also the factors. And maybe this wasn't so clear in the Rajneesh communes, but in Centrepoint, it was a family of families. So all these families, and they're all married to each other, and, people got together and then they broke up and then they married another couple, and people were step siblings and they were half siblings, and like the family tree is like crazy, so
Wow.
So it's this massive family, and also family built on love, theoretically, and honesty, theoretically, And so in the aftermath, when you have to exist with an utterly inconvenient, totally blowing the whole narrative out of the water, and it's your family, I'm still grappling with understanding that and how to walk the line, because there's kind of two positions. There's the old position, which is you just have to keep quiet about your story because it's inconvenient, it upsets mum and dad. That's the old story, the old way of being. And the other way of being is estrangement. I can't exist with these people anymore because being around them and hearing this conflicting narratives, I was damaged in this place, you had a great time, those conflicting narratives. Is there something in between, to coexist? Or is it impossible? I don't know. When it's your family.
That's $1 million question. And that's the work I do with my clients, with their families. Bear in mind, most of them are not been in a cult. So there's the acknowledgement of the cult aspect. I think that the leader was a charlatan, a psychopath, whatever, that the doctrine was wrong, that what they were preaching was harmful, and that that what they were preaching in the cult environment was excuses to cause harm, or so I think without that acknowledgement, first of all, that this environment was harmful, that what was happening there was harmful, that the belief was completely wrong. I don't think, how do you bridge that gap? If you don't think that was wrong, if you think child abuse is wrong, but you don't think that was wrong, that's the dissonance that I find, and then somebody exposes the guru as a sex abuser, and people just don't want to believe it because because it will crumble the whole world. But talking about parents, that's the position my father is in still. He still loves the guru. He still is the guru, still his master. It doesn't matter if the guru has been exposed as an abuser of women. It doesn't matter if his children were harmed. It doesn't matter. Like Osho was enlightened, he could do no wrong. So if that is still the narrative in his mind, I cannot see how a relationship would be possible, because I would have to accept. It's devastating.
That's the thing, isn't it? It's such a betrayal. It's a further betrayal for you to ongoingly hold to that truth. You can't. And the truth that what you experience, what you saw, what you're hearing from former children, and it's the same for me, is incompatible. It's
incompatible, and that is the difficult thing to accept. That is, it's so heartbreaking. I think that is so painful and so heartbreaking to realize that people supposed to care for you actually don't really care about you, but they're not capable of loving you.
They care about the idea, the belief. They care about the belief more. But then I think there's also the indoctrination. And that's the bit that I guess I'm trying to understand as I walk this journey, to understand what gets a person to fall for a charlatan and to absorb that the charlatan's worldview as their own, to forsake all else and to forsake the primary relationship with their child. That's what drives me to understand that. And to highlight actually how harmful it is to forsake that primary relationship. It's harmful then, during the time, it's harmful later, it's harmful for the whole of your lifespan as a child and as a parent. It's harmful for the lifespan of your children, the grandchildren. That forsaking in order to follow this belief system that's inherently so destructive.
Yes, and I think it is destructive. It makes you override your instincts, if you have any instincts to protect your children. You get into a group think that is difficult to go against. But there are people who have been in abusive relationships. They come out of those relationships. They recover from those relationships, even where their children were harmed, and then the repair work must begin. But if the parent continues to deny the child's experience, continues to not take responsibility, continues not to see the experience as harmful, I think that's where the problem is, because the experience was harmful in itself. The lack of repair, which you and I are talking about, the lack of repair is the issue.
Yeah, let's talk more about that, because I think we haven't gone into that, and that's the bit that, for me at least, I can forgive a great deal. I actually really can, particularly when it comes to the primary relationships in my life. But when there's an insistence and a intractable failure to move and to acknowledge and to do the work to repair, I can actually understand why people make the choices they have made in the past, where they end up in a group and make the choices. But when you're out of the group, or when you have the resources to start to rebuild your life again, and you don't repair this. I watched that movie from your friend. What's it called again?
Child of the Commune.
Child of the Commune.
Yeah,
and there's some scenes there where she's a former child of the community. Help me if I get this wrong. And she's asking some difficult questions of commune people and her mother, and there's no acknowledgement, there's no recognition. 30 years later, there's still this defensiveness, and there's still this unwillingness to see the significance of the harm that was caused to this woman when she was a child. Decades later. Wow. That's
it. That's the experience of many people. That continues to be the experience of a lot of people. When you Marusha made this documentary, it's now nearly 20 years ago, 18, something like that. She was very brave to do it at the time. And now there's kind of another round of revelations. And whilst it's good that it's all coming out and people are being confronted about it, with it also comes one side of it is the validation and the acknowledgement. The other side is the denial and the excuses. So we're seeing both in parallel with the recent revelations, also with people speaking out, like myself. So I get a lot of well done, or it's great, or this was helpful, etc. But I also get the denial. This never happened. It's not true. It's not true. Like that's the worst, right? That's the worst. It's not true, or that's not how I remember it. So I mean, you get that in families. You get that outside of cults, of course. Of course, this is a human trait. Yeah. So, but I think, her documentary was very good in showing what that looks like, what denial looks like, what excuses look like, what lack of responsibility looks like.
Yeah, I'll put the link to the documentary on the show notes, because I think it's really it gives a wonderful view of that. and it's certainly very moved by it myself.
Particularly to that cult, because that was it showed the attitude. You never came to me and told me that you were being abused when you were 13. It was up to you to come and tell me. If you didn't tell me, what could I have done? I mean, yeah, honestly, that was the attitude. Like, oh, it's your problem. It's your responsibility. You didn't say anything.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It's the sort of thing that happened at Centrepoint as well. Yeah.
Yes.
Put your own self first. Yeah. If you've got a problem,
I'm sure you've heard plenty of that.
Yeah.
Well, I'm not sure. I want to ask you, but yeah.
Well, what I've heard is, I mean, I have been on a journey in the last 5, 7, I don't know how many years, to try to draw out of the now quite elderly adults of Centrepoint some kind of communal response. And I've got it's been very disappointing, and at times it's been demoralizing, because I believe the children of Centrepoint, and I include myself in that, even though, like you, I don't identify myself as being as embedded as many and as hurt as many, but I know enough to have been harmed and to have experienced what I experienced. But I tried to ask for more, for some kind of courageous response, and I saw very little of any meaning. I saw individual adults reach out to me to tell me I don't know, they didn't even tell me what they wanted from me. They just sent me long emails describing their experiences and telling me how bad they felt. And that was it. And I thought, am I being used here to make these individuals feel better because they can say they did something? Because what they've done here is meaningless. They've just dumped on my shoulders their pain and walked away. That hasn't helped me. It hasn't helped any of their victims. And I don't know if these people were perpetrators or they just stood by. I think mostly they were telling me stories of coward inaction. And then there's been others who've contacted me to very much as a demonstration, because I wrote this open letter around the time the documentary was released in 2020 with the 2 women who I was in the documentary with, and in it we stated, and I think, just to make this clear, the actual writing and publication of the open letter, which stated what we felt to be the truth of the experience of the children. You can read that on my website. There's a Centrepoint Restoration project. You can read the open letter. That statement of fact in itself was a powerful act, which, though it didn't lead to a meaningful outcome that I hoped for, it in itself was a self-created statement of truth and acknowledgement. We did it, we created it, and we asked and invited others to sign it, and they did. About 50 or 60 people.
Amazing.
But some people reached out to try and sign it. Perpetrators, people who had been to jail or hadn't been to jail, and we knew they were perpetrators. And we're like, is this a demonstration? Are you doing this to make it clear to everyone around you, look, my name's on the open letter, and look, I've made right, but it's pretty easy to click a button on a website and say, could you add my name? That's pretty jolly easy. That's about 5 seconds worth of effort. And it's frankly, like you said earlier, it's offensive. It's insulting. It's empty. And So what I've seen is a whole bunch of nothing. I had one experience. Well, it was actually over 2 or 3 different moments when one former adult of the community gathered with a number of former children of the community on an online forum. And this person turned up with their raw uncertainty and hope and sorriness is the wrong word, but they came with this sort of intangible, not sure what to do, but wanting to do something to make it better. This one individual, and they were in their 80s, I think, elderly, and this person sat for probably over these different episodes, 4 or 5 hours with 6 or 7 of us, and just heard our stories. And that seems like nothing, really. But for those former children to have a former adult who was in a position of power and influence, who could have done something to step in and save them, to have this person sit there and listen and hear their pain and be utterly moved by it. There was no pretense in this. It was so powerful.
This is so important what you just said. And if anyone listening wants to know how it's done, that's it. You know, it's very moving, isn't it?
So
it's very moving. Yeah, there's no roadmap for these things. You have to show up and be willing to listen and to be open.
That's exactly what this former adult did. They showed up and they were willing, and they stayed in the pain. They didn't make it about them.
Yes.
They asked questions.
Yes.
There was very little about them in there, even though it was obvious that this person was really in pain.
Yes.
They didn't make it about them, and it was beautiful. It was beautiful, and and what I've heard from these other adults repeatedly, they've come to me and they've said, well, what should we do? And they've sat there and they've waited for me to organise an event, or give them the answers, or direct them to the right people, or they've emailed and they said, anyone who has an issue with me, please give them my email and let them know I'm willing to make it right with them. And I'm like, why is this my problem? Why is the making it right now my responsibility, simply because I have a profile? It's like, it's not my job to repair, to fix.
But there you just gave a beautiful example of what repair looks like and what repair doesn't look like. Yeah. And like you have been on the receiving end of both, and when it happens, it's beautiful. It really is beautiful. It's everything. It means everything. It puts people together in a place of vulnerability and trust and healing, and like it literally soothes the soul. I can't put it another way. And I'm fortunate to know someone like this, from someone who is very prominent in our cult, who she has engaged with the children in she's been feeling it with us, and I mean, it means everything, and she knows it means everything, and it's painful. It's really painful. It's painful for everyone, but it's I'm lost for words now, actually.
Well, I've been
because it's what I wish from my parents, really.
Yes, exactly.
Never got.
I think that's the thing that needs to be said. Is I have noticed there are a few people I know who've told me that their parents have done everything to make it right. And there's something different about those individuals, those children. There's something settled.
Yes.
And why, when your parents, who are the ones who cause the harm, cannot make it right, you go to the next best thing. And maybe I can't speak for everyone, that there'll be plenty of people for whom it doesn't matter what their parents do, they'll still want more than that, or they'll still need more than that. But what I talked about the armoured up thinking of some of the children of the Centrepoint community, that there was this sort of rejection of the need for an apology, of, like, why I don't need an apology. I don't need any of those awful adults, the people who hurt me or who let the hurt happen. I don't need anything from them. But yet, like I said, I saw in front of me in this group these people my age just like lapping up this acknowledgement. And I'm going to quote Judith Herman again. Sorry, I'm loving her right now. She's talking about the role of the community in healing, because at the end of the day, this happened in a community, right?
Yes.
The trauma happened in community, in family, in a wider community. And she says, sharing the traumatic experience with others is a precondition for the restitution of a sense of a meaningful world. In this process, the survivor seeks assistance not only from those closest to them, but also from the wider community. The response of the community has a powerful influence on the ultimate resolution of the trauma. Restoration of the breach between the traumatized person and the community depends first upon public acknowledgement of the traumatic event, and second, upon some form of community action. Once it is publicly recognised that a person has been harmed, the community must take action to assign responsibility for the harm and to repair the injury. These two responses, recognition and restitution, are necessary to rebuild the survivor's sense of order and justice. And I think that's what we're talking about, trying to find something of that in whatever way we can, because it is actually necessary for moving on, and we don't always find it. And we move on somehow anyway. But the deep desire for that is not because there's something inherently wrong or weak or something, I don't know, but it's because we're human, because this is what repair looks like.
And I don't think there is moving on. I don't believe, well, I think it's very difficult to move on without that. I think people sometimes are too premature in saying, I've moved on. I don't need an apology. I don't need repair. I've processed or whatever. I find that difficult to believe, given how much work I've done on myself and continue to do, and I work with other people too. And some part of you, of that child, is still kept in a waiting room, waiting for somebody to come towards them and to see them and to genuinely care about them and to ask all the questions that nobody bothered to ask after these experiences. So we ask questions of each other. And it's good that we do ask questions of each other, and that we can share as, let's say, siblings or kindred spirits of that who share very similar experiences. But you're right. I think a lot of people will go without an apology, and without even curiosity about what it was like for them.
But that's where the talking does the work, I think, because we're looking for a surrogate way of the acknowledgement and the repair and the restitution, because it's not happening from those guys.
Yeah.
We're looking for a surrogate, and there's more and more of these platforms where stories can be heard, and the truth can be told. And the fact is that the people who caused the harm usually don't, or who stood by and watched while the harm happened, usually don't have the emotional, psychological maturity or character even to make it right. I think those two examples that you and I both have of these individuals who've gone back and faced the past, they're rare people.
Yes, they're the exception rather than the rule. Yeah.
They're very rare. And so we have to find a way to do it with each other, for each other. Truth is so much a part of that.
When I see my parents now, I can totally see how they fell for it. And one of them is still in it, and the other one, I can see how it happened and how it could happen again in other shapes, and so I guess the work really is to accept that it's not going to come from where it should come from, unfortunately, and that's as devastating as it is. I think one day we have to come to terms with it.
And I think that's why things like the open letter that I was part of crafting, telling the truth and calling others to support that. That's why those are powerful acts. That's why a documentary where someone boldly states the truth that they experienced is so moving. That's why this conversation, which is just between you and I, but I'm sure others will identify with it, will be moving for others. So much of what we experienced is traumatic for us as individuals was made so much more painful because of the obfuscation and the lies and the minimization and the dismissing that went around it. It wasn't simply just said, this awful thing happened and I acknowledge it. There was decades of, it was nothing. I don't know what your problem is. It's your problem, in fact. Others have suffered more than you. Stop going on about this. So the simple truth has not been heard. And we haven't even talked about justice. But you can't do justice. You can't do repair without truth.
No. If you're still lying, if you're still lying and not believing people sharing their experiences and calling them liars, if you're lying yourself and then calling the people coming forward with their revelations liars and discrediting, no, there's no repair possible. No. Absolutely.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah. So we've had a really powerful conversation today, and I'm thinking of where we leave this with now. We haven't really talked much about our professional roles, that you're a therapist and I'm a doctor. And I think that makes us different from the average survivor of such experiences, because we've taken the pain of our past and we've used that energy somehow to inform our healing tool that we use when we with our clients or our patients. And there's hope in that, I think. There's hope in us both being willing to speak and stand in the positions that some of those other children we knew could never do. That gives me hope. Yeah. Thinking about how we finish up now.
There's definitely perhaps a way of channeling this into working with other people. And I mean, all therapists have a reason for going into the profession. I don't know about doctors, I'm sure as well, but I don't. We all have our stories, and it's usually someone in the family who either wanted to save their family or was an absorber of the emotions within the family, or took on the role of, I don't know, confidant or whatever it may be, which wasn't great for us, but a lot of therapists go into the profession for those reasons, and the cult aspect was definitely one of them for me. But for me, it's layered, because there were lots of other reasons for me to train as a therapist. So, and yeah, the multi-generational, transgenerational, and then put the cult on top of that, and yeah, and so perhaps it's a good way of doing the work for ourselves, is to kind of work with people, because it's an exchange, and I guess it makes us feel connected and useful, and there's meaning and purpose in it. And yeah, so I love my work, and I'm sure you do. And you love yours too. And yeah, it's definitely a way of finding a way forward.
No, I agree. Unfortunately, of course, some of these groups use therapy to traumatize people, like Centrepoint did as part of it. So
that's right. We didn't even delve into that. Oh my goodness.
We didn't go into that. There is so much we could talk about. I know that you, and I've watched a couple of them or listened to a couple of them, have told your story, and I should have said this right at the beginning. You've told your story in a couple of other podcast platforms with Rachel Bernstein on Indoctrination, and another guy who I've forgotten. What was the other one?
Mark Torrender. And and I also spoke on Cult Vault.
The Cult Vault, yes, as well. Yes, I listened to that too. So we'll put those links in the podcast, because knowing, in the show notes, because knowing that you'd already shared so much of your story, there were things that we skipped over, because we wanted to get into this sort of meat that we can talk specifically to, that others can't. So they'll go on the show notes. And I just want to say, Sam, thank you so much for allowing yourself to get go back into this stuff, that you said earlier, that this has been hard for you to build up to this, because you're going back into the old stuff, and that's a gift to me and to our platform that you've given that story to us, and it is really great to chuck around these really hard ideas with you that there aren't many people I can say these things to and have this conversation with. It's been really,
likewise.
Yeah.
Likewise. Yeah.
And we've had so many other conversations which we haven't pulled some of that content in from those conversations. So I think we might have to come back to it on another occasion too. But
we could just keep talking, right? But yes.
We could. We need to give the listeners a break, I think.
Thank you so much for inviting me on your podcast. It's been such a privilege, and I have really enjoyed talking to you. The time just flew by.
Yeah, we really sunk into some deep stuff there. Guys, I'd love to hear your thoughts on it.
Wow, yes, that was very powerful, very raw, very painful things were talked about. And it's a topic we could talk about for hours and hours, I think, and I'd love to invite our listeners as well. I wish I could hear, some of their thoughts as they listen to this topic, because this topic felt very, very in the moment. It wasn't just reflecting on things in the past that might have happened in a previous decade or to somebody else. It was like, you and Sam opened your souls to show us what it is like to struggle in the present with all of those loose ends, those untied, threads around family relationships, around, trying to navigate relationships with parents who were part of the web of harm, but who are still in your life. Wow, so complicated and such tricky territory for so many of us, especially second generation, I think, members or multi-generational members to navigate.
Yeah, I was just, again, struck by, the depth of it, the complexity, and something that I can't stop thinking about was Sam mentioned that she said she doesn't think recovery is possible when there hasn't been acknowledgement and a genuine attempt at repair. And I thought, that's difficult to swallow that, because I like to think that people can recover and that you don't have to rely on your perpetrator to do that job for you, because they may never do that. And so there's kind of a sense of a little bit of hopelessness and despair there. And yet I like to think about what you said further on, Caz, that you said, I have a great capacity to forgive. So there is something in this concept that perhaps needs fleshing out, that if you're just sitting around waiting for the day that your perpetrator or the group that you're involved in is going to make the fantastic apology, the real one even, the acknowledgement, and that all of a sudden you're just going to come right. Unfortunately, that's not true either.
Well, aren't we modelling moving on though?
Yeah.
And I remember moving forwards. That's right. Because there's something in me that is always going to yearn for deep acknowledgement of this issue from the key players. And so I can't deny that. And she said at some point about we're stuck in the waiting room. Yeah, we're children stuck in the waiting room. And I was like, yeah, we're getting on, but a part of us stuck in the waiting room. And maybe that part that is stuck in the waiting room is the part that notices in me a person who has been hurt and asks them what happened to you. Because I'm stuck in the waiting room. I don't know. I mean, I'm sure even if I had acknowledgement, I'd ask that question. But there's a rawness there that for most of us, I used to believe it was possible for it to be sorted, but not in my case anymore. I've accepted that it's probably not going to be.
I really loved how towards the end there you talked about how absolutely imperative and powerful it is to be heard and to be listened to and to have someone acknowledge your pain. That's so imperative. Even if you can never get it from your parents or whoever the key perpetrators or players were, but that you go on this search to find someone. It's like, that little inner child goes on a search to find someone to hear you, someone to be safe with, someone to validate what happened to you. And for me, there's a lot of hope in that. When I heard that, I thought that's exactly right. That's what I've experienced, is that, I have found safe people and people to say, I am so sorry that you ever experienced that. And that definitely was healing, even though, as you said, there's always going to be a part that longs and waits and hopes for that to come from the actual person. It's like the second best thing can be just a caring and compassionate somebody else.
Because it's betrayal. And so betrayal is a really deep, deep concept. And a betrayal, it could well keep you sitting as a child in a waiting room.
Well, it keeps you believing that this is possible and it could happen again. So that people can't be trusted, they're not safe. And I see some armoured upness in those people who have never found a way to heal that bit. And it, like I said, it doesn't, you're right, it doesn't have to come from the original betrayer. It can come from elsewhere. And I've talked quite a bit. I have this idea in my head about the story of my life that I'm always editing. I'm looking back, and the story I told of my life when I was 10 and when I was 15, 21, 40, quite different stories. And I'm editing them slowly as I go along. And part of my involvement in this whole work was about going, I'm really sick of some of those chapters that are in this book that I didn't write. I had no power over, I had no say over. And I'm going to go back and write a different ending. I'm going to edit this. I'm going to edit those chapters to say, no, there was someone who did care.
Yes.
Someone who noticed, and it did matter.
Because you just mentioned the word power and control, and I wonder if it's giving too much control to someone in your own recovery and repair and journey, and if that involves forgiveness. Yeah, you're giving too much power and control to a perpetrator, suggesting that they're holding you back from experiencing.
I don't think she was suggesting that they were.
No.
I think she was highlighting that child that's in the waiting room, and you need to do something.
Yeah, that child does need to be heard. Yeah,
definitely. Yeah, and imagine when the pain of recognizing it could be your parents that aren't acknowledging that hurts massively.
Yeah, you can hear that pain there for her, to talk about how her father still, I think she follows the guru and all that kind of thing, and that ongoing pain of having people who are immediately present in your life who are holding on to a narrative that just with its very existence is a narrative that denies your narrative.
Yes.
Like for him to keep believing in his guru and believing that he's this divine, wonderful being, just immediately denies and invalidates her own experiences. How do you try and have a relationship when you're both, holding on to different versions of truth here?
She talked about how did you absorb the worldview of a charlatan and forsake your primary relationships. Whoa.
Yeah. That was a powerful and painful. And that struck close to the bone, because that is right. That's what these groups do. That's what these gurus or leaders do, is that they call for primary and soul loyalty. And, in the exclusive brethren, they used to have a saying that about the first family and the second family. And basically it was meaning that, the brethren bonds were your greatest family, and that biological family, whether it was spouse or kids or parents, they came second. Like, to actively teach that stuff is, worrying.
It's really repugnant, particularly if you're a vulnerable, dependent child. Yeah.
I found it fascinating because you opened up about some disappointment and some demoralising feelings you experienced when you wrote a public letter, the Centrepoint Restoration letter, and you said you wanted a courageous response. But I just remember my response to reading your letter. I just burst into tears, and I copied the whole thing and I posted it in the Glorabel Leavers private updates page and went, wow, look at this. This group that was, had so many similarities to Glorabel, and it ended this many years ago. And off the back of the documentaries that many Leavers had watched, look at this attempt to pull together and ask for conversations and ask to be heard. That brought me to tears. I was moved deeply, deeply by that. Yeah.
Well, that's what I mean about a new chapter.
Yes.
There's a new chapter.
Because I said at the end of that, I want to meet that lady. I got on the phone, so it was probably Natalie Malcon, and I said, I really I'd love to meet.
Well, lucky you did get to meet
look at that. Yeah, so that was a courageous act, and you did a courageous act. And what was that comment about justice? You can't do justice without truth telling, and if you're still lying and calling others liars, no repair is possible. So somewhere people have to tell truth. And I'm deep in some of this stuff at the moment with Glorabel Leavers, supporting those who are looking for justice through the courts, and there was a ridiculous newspaper apology. And, Leavers disrespect that immensely. That is not recovery, repair, restitution. What did Judith Herman, and we'll have to wrap it up, but she said, and I'm going to start quoting her now, Caz, because of you. What was it? Recognition and restitution are necessary to rebuild the survivor's sense of order and justice. And they're valid steps in people's recovery and repair. And it's really unhelpful to have other people who were involved in the group, or bystanders, or perhaps people that left earlier, or people with a different perspective, to shout at people and say, you don't need restitution, or you don't need justice. Just move on and forgive. It's extremely unhelpful and hurtful and harmful. Actually, perhaps these people do need that for their very deeply personal repair journey. It's personal.
And maybe society around them needs to see it happening so they can have hope for their own situations that are parallel but not the same. Like victims of domestic violence, people have been bullied at work. Like these times when people make it right for humans they've harmed. Speak to some hope that we can all have when relationships destroyed by mistreatment. Like every time I hear like all that stuff in the all those testimonies that came out in court from different people in the Royal Inquiry into Abuse and Care, so snippets were in the news, and like I was getting moved constantly by these stories of people who stood up, told the truth, and asked for justice.
Wow.
I didn't think of them as weak or going on about it or
bitter.
Any of the bitter. I thought powerful.
Courageous.
Thank you for standing with me to say the truth matters, and that being heard and validated is integral for all humanity, not just my story.
Well, thank you for sharing truth. Thank you for being courageous. Thank you to you and Sam. And I guess we want to thank all of our listeners and our audience, the people who follow along, the people who share the stories of those people who stand up in this public sphere, tell their stories, tell the truth. Let's be a community of empathetic people who love on people who stand up and tell the truth. So thanks for watching in, listening in. Head over to the Facebook page and share these episodes around. They're powerful, they're right for now, they're right for the past, and these messages are right for the future. It's always a good time to learn about repair, recovery, forgiveness, and hope. Thanks everyone for joining us. Goodbye.
See you later.
If anything in today's episode was difficult or upsetting for you and you would like to talk to somebody, we encourage our New Zealand listeners to free call or text 1737 for support from a trained counsellor. Or you might like to visit the resources section of the Olive Leaf Network website, where you can find a range of organisations and resources that might be able to support you. We would also like to remind you that the views and thoughts and opinions that have been expressed in this program are the speakers alone, and Cult Chat does not necessarily endorse or share them.